Hey, it's Marko here from Fair Realty, Victoria, BC, with some huge news from the provincial government that came out yesterday that's going to heavily impact the way tenanted properties are sold in BC. So up until now, if you were a buyer and you bought a tenanted property and you wanted to move in with your family to live in that property, it was required by law that the tenant be given 2 months notice by the seller landlord based on a letter provided from the buyer to the landlord that the buyer would be using that premise for personal use. And the tenant was also given 1 month's compensation or 1 month's free rent. As of July 18th, that is now changing. The tenant is now required to be given 4 months notice at the start of a next pay period. So it's not really 4 months notice, it's between 4 and 5 months notice, depending on when during the month the conditions are lifted on the accepted offer, because the notice to the tenant can only be given once the buyer removes all the conditions on their contract. So if the buyer removes conditions on a contract August 5th, the 4 months notice doesn't kick in until September 1st. Online, people are raving about this new legislation. It's great for tenants. Tenants now have 4 months to find a property. People are complaining that rents are too high, half their paycheck. The government's really good at manipulating people. The reason your rent is half the paycheck is because of government bureaucracy and government failed policies in the last 20, 30 years, where the supply is restricted, immigration's through the roof. That is why your rent is super high, not because of the 2 or 4 months notice. A lot of factors in this government policy are being overlooked, and I do believe it's short-sighted. For every action, there is a reaction. So let me give you a few problems that are going to arise from this new legislation. If you're a first-time buyer, young family, let's say you want to buy a starter home in Victoria, let's say that property's tenanted. If you make an offer on July 25th, you make an offer on July 25th, you have 10 days of conditions, financing, inspection. That takes you to August 5th. You remove conditions on August 5th. Only at that point can the 4 months notice be given. That means that notice starts September 1st. The tenant has to move out December 31st. Your earliest vacant possession as the buyer is in the new year if you're making an offer at the end of July. What owner-occupier is going to want to wait 5 months to get into a property? Not only that, it creates a lot of mortgage issues. There are no rate holds beyond 120 days. So you're buying a property, but you don't know what your mortgage rate is going to be because no bank can hold a rate that long that exceeds the notice period. Many other intricacies in all of this. When you give a tenant what used to be 2 months notice, now it's 4 months notice. The tenant in return can give the landlord 10 days notice that they're moving out, and they still get the 1 month free. So let me go back to that example. Buyer removes conditions August 5th. The notice is given to the tenant, let's say August 6th. Completion possession date is fixed in the contract as of the new year. Let's say January 3rd or 4th. At that point, the tenant can turn around and say, oh, here's 10 days notice, I'm moving August 27th. At this point, the landlord has no recourse against the buyer to go back and have the buyer move up the completion date, let's say to September. The buyer can simply say, well, no, completion date is January 3rd. So now the landlord's carrying a vacant property for literally 4 months. There's a lot of intricacies the government did not think about here. Do I feel bad for tenants? Yeah, I do feel bad for tenants, but there is a marketplace. If tenants want security, they can sign leases. There's a plenty of purpose-built rentals being built all across Victoria. If you rent in a purpose-built rental, essentially, you're never going to be given notice. So I believe more in a free market. What this is going to do, it's also going to cause a lot of owners that maybe have adult children in other parts of Canada. Maybe those adult children are thinking about coming back home. Various scenarios. People are not going to want to rent out their basement suite because they're going to be like, well, if I need it for family use, I have to give the tenant 4 months notice, which once again is actually 4 to 5 months notice. I'm not in control of my property. And when you pile on legislation that's against the landlords, an attack on landlords, guess what's going to happen? There's going to be less inventory in the marketplace, and the rents are simply going to go up. I do think there's going to be some opportunities out there for certain people given all of this. For example, that example I gave you with first-time buyers having to wait 5 months to get into their property. Well, if someone's selling a starter home that's tenanted, and they have two options. They can sell to a first-time buyer, and they can wait 5 months to get paid, and they have to worry about the tenant actually moving out, or they can sell to a investor or a developer or a builder that can complete on it right away, and that developer investor is just going to get rid of the tenants once they get a building permit, let's say to build a missing middle property. They're probably going to lean towards that. So it's going to negatively actually impact first-time buyers because they need vacant possession. I don't even know how they're going to figure out the mortgage. It's going to give an advantage to more sophisticated buyers who have capital, who can take on the tenants and deal with it after the fact versus buyers trying to enter the marketplace. Basically, I don't think this policy helps first-time buyers whatsoever. Does it help tenants? Yeah, I guess they get a bit more time to look for a property, but it's not going to make an impact on rents. It's actually going to increase rents. Do you know why tenants are stressed when they're given 2 months notice, even with the 1 month being free? It's because we don't have enough supply out there. There isn't enough vacancy. We should be working on increasing supply so when a tenant is given notice, they have something to choose from. This is a band-aid solution. I don't know if I can even call it a band-aid solution. It's just going to increase rents. It's going to make it harder for first-time buyers to get into the market. It's going to create a lot more uncertainty when it comes to selling tenanted properties. But it's funny, you go on Facebook, you go on Reddit, everyone's raving about this policy. The government has pitted one class of people against another, as I just discussed in another video I made about the Airbnb ban, while the government continues to build more and more bureaucracy, but they're not building more housing.